What's it take to make all these gnocchi? Plain old frozen spinach, Parmesan cheese, and milk. Stick around to get in touch with your inner Italian. Hello Tuscan Warriors, I'm Mr. Spork and these are Mr. Spork's hands. As you can tell from looking at the bench, I am making gnocchi for you guys today. Some people are going to argue about that. Some people are going to say gnocchi is only made with potato and gnudi, with a silent G at the front, is only made with cheese. And quite frankly, I've seen it both ways. It kind of depends on what hill you're standing on in Italy. But I got this recipe from a really good friend, a wine writer many, many years ago who has sadly departed this earth. And he found the recipe when he and his wife were traveling in Tuscany in an old wooden desk. And on that recipe, it was called Gnocchi Verdi con Spinaci. So they called them gnocchi there. I'm calling them gnocchi here in his honor. If you want to argue Italian semantics, I am not the person to do that, all right? So no hate mail, no angry Italians leaving me messages. If you want to make cheese gnocchi, you got to have cheese. And of course, you could just go to the store and buy ricotta, but you know, for half the price and in less time than it takes to drive to the store and back, you can just make some cheese curds that will work perfectly well in this recipe. All I've done here is I've taken 2 liters of whole milk. It won't work with skim or non-fat milk. And I've brought it just shy of the boil, about 210 degrees. You don't have to be too precise because in this quick cheese, we're not trying to do any crazy chemistry here. Brought it up to that temperature. I've got, for every liter, a tablespoon and a half. So in this case, I've got 3 tablespoons for the 2 liters of plain ordinary white vinegar. I'm just going to pour that in. I'm going to give it a quick stir with a sterilized spoon. And those curds are going to start to form really, really quick. If you didn't have vinegar around for whatever reason, you could certainly use lemon. That's going to leave just a hint of a lemon flavor behind. That's kind of tasty sometimes. So lemon or vinegar. If it doesn't immediately start to make curds, you can see it's already starting here, but if it doesn't immediately start to make curds, don't worry. But if after a minute or two it still hasn't made any kind of curds, you might need to slip just a little bit more acid, vinegar, or lemon juice in there to get it started. So here we are after 10 minutes of doing completely unrelated things like reading the comments you guys leave down below videos and chasing the cats out of the houseplants. I've got nice clean separation, curds and whey, as you can see. All I'm going to do is drain that into a reservoir. I've got a nice big bowl to catch the whey because the whey is very useful in other kind of baking, make great scones. I'll strainer and then I put some cheesecloth over that. All I'm going to do is drain this into here. For this recipe, I'm using standard issue frozen chopped spinach, available year-round in any mega market on the planet. I've tried using fresh and cooking it down, and while that is delicious, and I'm sure there are places where it makes a difference, in this recipe, doesn't make any difference to the final flavor. I've got 300 grams on the scale. That's 300 grams of frozen spinach out of the bag, so the water's still in there. And the way to get the first part of the water out is to use a tea towel. This is my trusty old tea towel. I've been making this recipe for 2 decades, and so you can see this one's been through the wash a few times. Don't use a tea towel that you don't want to turn green, basically. And I'm basically going to gather it up, and I'm going to squeeze as much as I possibly can. Just going to do a little bit here. You can see how much is already coming out. I'm going to do the rest of this over the sink, and I'll reweigh it for you. So after several minutes of squeezing my spinach flavored tension ball, you can see I'm down to less than half of what I started with. 300 grams went down to 144 grams in this particular case. And you can see what I mean about it turning the tea towel green. So even with all that squeezing, we're still not quite as dry as we want it to be, but we're going to fix that by frying it until the steam stops rising off of the spinach. And that also gives us an excuse to get some extra flavors in the pan. Just going to get some olive oil in here real quick. And to flavor that oil, I'm going to get a garlic clove in there. I'm going to get the skin off using the Canadian garlic press, a hockey puck. Mash it, off comes the skin. Maybe someday I'll get hockey pucks made with my logo on it. And then you could slice it, you could throw it in just like this. I want to get maximum flavor, so I'm going to use my trusty old garlic press. In it goes. I'm over a medium heat there. And in goes that spinach. And then I'm just going to work it until, as I say, steam stops coming off of the pan. After a couple minutes, it's almost done steaming. That gave me time to go grind some white peppercorn nice and fresh. You definitely want to grind it fresh. Just want to get it in that pan so it hits that oil and blooms. Give it a last stir or two. And this is ready to go into the gnocchi mix. So just to show you what my cheese has been doing while we were working on the spinach, that whey has drained off and I've already taken a full liter of whey out of that. There's a lot of whey that comes out of the cheese, but it is ready to go. If there is one flavor that is quintessential for these in all the Italian recipes I've seen, it's nutmeg. So always, 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 please grind your nutmeg fresh. It is absolutely not the same as the stuff in the pre-ground bottles. Basically, nutmeg loses 90% of its flavor in the first 24 hours after being ground. So get yourself a microplane, buy yourself whole nutmegs, and as you can see, I like a lot in there. I'm probably going to use a good third of a nut of nutmeg in the recipe. Then I want to use probably about 1.5 times the ricotta to the volume of spinach. You can scale this up or down any way you want. So I'm going to go until it looks about right. As I say, I will have extra from that 2 liters of milk batch that I made. Something close to that amount. The extra will not go to waste if I don't eat it all. Oh, it's good. But you'll notice that there is no salt anywhere in this yet, so we're definitely going to need a pinch or 3 of salt, not only to flavor the spinach, but also to flavor the cheese curds. I'm just going to test a ball. Yeah, I think I'm going to do just a touch more flour. You will learn what works after your first or second batch. Next, you want to get a large egg in there. If you're making a particularly big batch, you might need 2 eggs. And the easiest way to work that in is with a chopstick. And now last but very much not least, we got to get some Parmesan in there for flavor. If you aren't grinding your Parmesan from fresh, I don't know that we can be friends. So get to grating because you're going to use probably half of that volume of freshly grated Parmesan. And there is my gorgeous pinnacle of Parmesan. As you can see, it's quite a lot of volume. It's really not that much by weight, but all of that is going to go into the mix. And so I am up to fighting temperature on my pot of lightly salted water. You probably noticed earlier I was really light-handed with the salt going into the actual gnocchi dough. That's because obviously the Parmesan's got a lot of salt in it, but you do want a little bit more salt in the cooking water. Now it's time to make these. The only tool to use is your hands, and I'm going to make them about like that. And just because somebody's going to ask, that's a 1-inch gnocchi. If you make them any bigger, they're probably not going to cook completely on the inside. If you make them any smaller, they're just not as delicious, is what it boils down to. Now, my tool of choice is something like this that'll allow the water to drain out. I like it better than, obviously, a spoon. You're going to get too much water there. And I don't actually like to use a spider because what happens is the gnocchi will set between the ribs of the spider. So you find yourself something close to this. And if you've got a really deep pot, you may not have to do this. It's just my deep pot doesn't work on the induction. So what I do is I set them in the water, count to 10, 9, 10, you know what I'm saying. And then you can let them go, and that way they won't sploosh on the bottom of the pot. So I give mine about a minute after they've risen to the top of the water. Gently ease them out. I'm just going to park them over here for now. I'm going to show you a couple different ways to finish them in with the next batch. As I get to the last batch, you can see I've given myself a little bit of expansion room for resting. The reason is that when these are straight out of the pot, still very hot, they will stick together if they're touching. So give yourself plenty of space and room to work there. The last 3, give them just a couple seconds to cool down. So after these have cooled and set just a little bit, they are ready to eat as is if that's how you want them. You can certainly put them on top of a red sauce. Notice the colors of the Italian flag. I know Jacques Pepin makes a really simple and incredibly delicious red pepper sauce for his ricotta dumplings. You can actually pan fry them with browned butter and sage. Oh, good Lord, that is delicious. Absolutely try that one time. But one of my favorite ways to do this as an appetizer is to take a pan of these gnocchi, make sure that, again, that they're separated, put a little bit of butter on top of all of them. You keep them separated so that the sides will crisp up just a little bit. And then gild the proverbial lily with just a little bit more Parmesan. And these are going to go into a 350-degree oven that I've had warming in anticipation in the background. I'll show you what it looks like in just a second. So I just pulled a pan of the sage brown butter version of finishing these off. It is absolutely delicious that way. You gotta try it that way at least once. For the cocktail version, as I call it, all I did was bake them in that 350 oven for about 10 minutes, then twist over to broil for about a minute or two to give them that little bit of blush on top. And of course, we've got the Italian flag version on top of some kind of an interesting red sauce, a little bit of extra basil, Parmesan, and olive oil on there. Whether you cook them one of these ways or whether you just eat them straight out of a pot, they are going to be delicious. I do hope you try a batch. I hope you got some ideas out of this recipe. I hope you realize how much I appreciate each and every one of you. Every click, every like, every subscribe and notify and Tweety, Insta-share and all that sort of stuff really adds up to let me keep doing this for you. And of course, the ads on either end go straight to the Parmesan budget to allow me to keep doing this for you. I do hope you try a batch. Until next time, I am Mr. Spork and these are Mr. Spork's hands, and I really don't know if I'm going to have room for gelato after all of this. What, do you want me to weigh you now?